Well, hello. I am Benjamin Byron Davis. I play Dutch Vanderlyn in the Red Dead Redemption series, and I am delighted to be here talking with MCM Comic Con on the occasion of the 10th anniversary of the release of Red Dead Redemption. Looking back on 10 years of Red Dead Redemption, what does this series mean to you? What do you hope its legacy has been for the games industry? Well, those are two pretty big questions. What does the series mean to me? What the series means to me is that I was lucky enough to land that gig and to be part of what I think is truly epic storytelling. I think what Rockstar Games achieved, both with Red Dead Redemption, with their entire slate of titles, but particularly with Red Dead Redemption, was they created a narrative that I think is as strong. When I'm talking to people who don't play games and I'm trying to get them to understand what I think makes Red Dead Redemption so special, the thing that I think Red Dead Redemption and Red Dead Redemption 2, they exemplify something that I think is much closer to literature than what I think most people, however wrong they might be, but most people, when they think about video games, they don't really think about the depth of character and storytelling that I think Rockstar really set a very high bar with the first Red Dead game. And as a fan of all sorts of other studios, I think that you can see the impact that Red Dead had on titles all across the spectrum. So to just be a small part of that was a real thrill, and I cannot believe it's 10 years later, but I'm still tickled pink that I got the opportunity to play Dutch Vanderlyn. I'm less tickled pink that I just used the expression tickled pink, but we're going to move on. And what do I hope its legacy has been for the games industry? I don't know. I'm as I said, I'm an actor. I'm not a part of the larger thrust of things that are moving the games industry along. But I think, if anything, I hope that the Red Dead series demonstrates that there's an audience out there for long-form storytelling, that it's not just about gameplay, it's also about the narrative and the story that you're trying to tell. And I think that Rockstar's always stood for epic storytelling, but I think in particular the Red Dead game, and I think Red Dead 2 is an even greater example of it, demonstrates that it's not just about the gameplay, and it's not just about the competition with friends. All of that is wonderful and magnificent, but there is also room in the industry for these stories that really couldn't be told in any other medium. What was your experience of auditioning for the role, and what do you think it was that ultimately earned you the part? Were you familiar with Rockstar's work before auditioning? My experience of auditioning for the role was that I got a call from my agent saying that I had to get out to Kathy Knowles Casting in Santa Monica. I live in Hollywood. At about 4:30 in the afternoon, and that's not a time anybody who knows that part of the world, nobody wants to drive at that hour out there, and it was for an untitled cowboy project, I guess is what it was, the audition. But I had just done a short film called Black Eyed Sue about a year before, and I developed this sort of take of a character. And I brought that voice with me, and I went into this audition, and one of the Rockstar producers, they didn't identify them. Maybe they did. We might have signed a non-disclosure agreement there, which I hope I'm not violating. But Francesca auditioned me, and I read through some material, and she said on the spot, she said, "We're going to have something for you." And she wanted to make sure I was comfortable with violence, and I said I was very comfortable with violence. I'm okay with it in performance. And was I familiar with Rockstar's work before auditioning? Not only was I familiar with Rockstar's work before auditioning, I remember distinctly when I was playing for the first time Grand Theft Auto 3. And for me, Grand Theft Auto 3 was about as huge jump forward as I think Super Mario 64 was, which was just when everything went 3D, and it blew my mind. But the fact that in Grand Theft Auto 3 you'd try to figure out something the game wouldn't let you do, and you couldn't. You could do anything, and it just was mind-boggling. But as I was playing that game, and the cutscenes that they had in that game, it occurred to me, these are actors. This is a job. This is a gig. And I remember distinctly while playing that game thinking, that might be a fun gig. And I will tell you something, it is a fun gig. Having worked on both games, what were some of the differences in the two projects? Well, the simple differences are the scale. What we did from an actor's point of view, I can't speak to the developers and the animators and their work, although I know the scale was much bigger for them as well. But from the performer's point of view, the work that I did on the first Red Dead, I think I had 2 sessions that lasted about a week each over maybe 3 months' time, and then that was everything. And that was all of Dutch and all of Nostis on the first game. One more session of just doing VO, but the performance capture stuff, that was done rather quickly. And the other thing was we did that in Santa Monica. When we came back to do Red Dead 2, we were working in New York State, and so the commute was a lot longer for me, and not that I'm complaining, and just the scope of it, literally the size of it. I had done, in my first 3 weeks on Red Dead 2, I'd done more work than I did in my entire time on Red Dead 1, and that was just the beginning. I was on the game for nearly 5 years, and it was just singular. I've never had an experience like it. I don't know many actors who have. It was just an extraordinary experience, extraordinary time working with the magnificent actors that were surrounding me in this cast, and the amazing, amazing folks at Rockstar Games that I'm really happy to say I've been able to maintain a working relationship with for over 10 years, and it's pretty phenomenal. But the other thing that was different, I guess, in working on the games was I knew so much more working on the second one out of anybody, because I knew the end of my story, and I knew what was owed in the telling of my story, and I had a much firmer grasp of who Dutch van der Linde was when we were working on the second one than I did when we were working on the first one. Well, that's a good segue. Did you feel any pressure on your performance as Dutch in the sequel, given the success of the original? Yes. Yes, I did. I felt a great deal of pressure. I showed up on the first day and went up to our director, Rod Edge, and I said, Rod, the first game I'm as proud of that as I am of anything I've ever done. Are we going to screw this up? I was legitimately afraid. And Rod said, no, it's going to be better. And Rod was, as is often the case, he was right. But I don't even know that I would say it was better, because I think Red Dead Redemption 2 does something that prequels should do, and which is it feels like it was always there. Like the first game becomes, I think, quite richer because of the second game. But I don't know. I'm just amazed that I've gotten to play with these people, these crazy people at Rockstar for so long, and on such a worthy story. It's a great joy. But so yeah, I did feel pressure, but I think we got it done. But it was at the beginning of it. It was, and you can still hear some of the stuff in the game. I'm still dialing into all of Dutch's sounds at the beginning of it. But by the end of it, we knew Dutch pretty well. I'd say. In Red Dead 2, Dutch changes throughout the game, although we ultimately know how things will end. How did you portray that character's journey? I took it as it came, which is really all you can do. I knew that the cheese was going to slide off the cracker for Dutch at some point, and I didn't know exactly how. And we didn't get the whole script at once, so we're piecing it together as we go, and I think the writers are as well. They have the broad strokes of where they want to get to, but the details of how we get there were developed, I think, throughout the creation of the game. I've told the story before, but when we did the scene when the O'Driscolls send Kieran back to camp and Dutch feels as though he's been outplayed by Colm, that was a moment that we knew was going to be important in showing Dutch getting a little bit off balance. And I took it to an extreme, and our director Rod pulled me aside and said to me, Ben, if Dutch is that crazy now, he's never going to get to the second game. So there was modulation of the approach, but portraying him in his decline was much less fun to play than playing him when he was in his prime. So I would say that was one of the challenges, was having to take a character that I loved so much in so many ways and make him miss things and not see things clearly, and to still find his spine within that confusion, but legitimately try to keep him true to himself while he is being so misled by circumstances and Micah. If you could change one thing about your character's arc, what would it be? Nothing. I would not change a thing. Were there any characters across film or games that inspired your performance? Was the Western genre a big part of that? Characters across that inspired my performance? That's a tough one to answer. The first Dutch was, as I said, I think earlier, he was based on this guy Osborne Crawl that I'd created for a short film that I had done with some friends out in the Arizona desert, about 2005, I think we did that. And then all I did from there was I sort of took that voice, and what Rockstar told me about the guy was he was extraordinarily well read. He'd been a gang leader. He'd lost his mind, and he was charismatic. And so I took the voice, and I took that bit of information I got from the studio, and that was pretty much Dutch in the first game. And then when I came back for the second game, it was more about honoring the work that everyone had done on the first game than it really was in terms of finding inspiration. I certainly did read a lot. You know, there's a lot of similarities between Butch Cassidy and the Hole in the Wall gang and the Dutch Vanderlyn gang. So steeping myself in the history of the period was part of the process, to be sure. And then, yeah, watching great Western films. Unforgiven is one that I adore, and The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. But there's not too many figures that I think, I think Dutch is, he's not based on anybody. If he's inspired by anything, he's inspired by the magnificent writing from Dan Houser and Michael Unsworth and others. He kind of was in charge of everything, I think. But to be in a Western, to be in that environment, even when you're in a performance capture suit and you're wearing cowboy boots though, and you got your 6-shooters. I mean, it's playing cowboys is playing cowboys. It's, for me, I can't think of a better format, I guess, than the Western. It's fun. Have any of your own quirks and personality made it into the character and your performance, and has any part of them rubbed off on you? Well, sure. There's a lot of me in Dutch. We have similar voices. I mean, I'm not nearly as self-assured as Dutch is. I wish I were. But I kill fewer people than Dutch does. He's pretty comfortable doing that. But I will say that, the process was, we would be, when work was humming, you'd be working for around 3 weeks, you'd be off for 2 weeks, and then on for 3 weeks and off for 2 weeks. And those periods when you were on, we were pretty much sequestered. For those of us that were traveling from out of state to work, we were sequestered in our hotels, and we were working on all the lines all the time. But I would, 3 weeks of work of playing Dutch and being in Dutch's sort of state of mind, you would find yourself, I'd get scary with cab drivers that pissed me off, or if I had to talk to people, I could find a pretty fearsome state to adopt when I was frustrated, when I was in the thick of playing Dutch. That happens less frequently these days, and I can't say I'm happy about it. But yeah, I think some of that rubbed off on me. I certainly love that Dutch never says die. He doesn't have a lot of quit in him, and I like to think that I have he and I share that characteristic. Are there scenes from either game that stand out to you as being quite difficult, or that still stick with you? Yes. Yeah. Difficult can mean lots of things. I mean, there are difficult things. Walking along the cliffs to get to the cave in Guarma, most people don't even imagine that that's us, but that was me and Roger, and that took a couple of days to travel that terrain, and I'm not great with heights, so that was difficult on that level. We weren't nearly as high as it looks in the game, but we were 5 or 6 feet off the ground. And another challenge was, and this is for those that have yet to play either game, I'd say there's spoilers. I assume we've announced spoilers already, but there's a scene in Red Dead 2 that is it's a reflection of Red Dead 1, the scene in Cochonay, where it's the last scene Dutch and John have together, is echoed in this scene that we did in Red Dead 2, and I was afraid that was not going to work, and I thought it was going to step on the original game in a way that I was worried about. And like any time I was afraid of something like that, I would bring it up and I would share it, and Rod would always tell me to trust him, and I always would, and I would. I'm delighted to report he would always pull it off, and so I think that scene, not only does that scene, so that was a challenge to play, but I'm really glad that we did it, because now it helps, to my mind, make the game feel like it's all one thing. That in a way, at the end on that cliff, Arthur is on Dutch's mind. That I find poignant, and I think it really worked. So it was a challenge to do, but it was. I think we pulled it off. The technology of Red Dead 2 means players could experience a different end for each character. What were some of the challenges of that for my performance? None. You can do nothing to change Dutch. I was really. That's an untold story, I guess, from the first game that I thought was really bold, and it's when I understood what great storytellers Rockstar really were. When we were doing the scene, the Dutch's last scene in the first game, there was some question as to whether or not it was going to be up to the player how Dutch's fate was going to unfold. But it ended up it wasn't. There was no option. So Dutch is in charge of his own fate at all times. You can't change Dutch. And that's something I admire about the guy, and it's something that I think when I saw, as beautifully as they did it, but I mean, Roger Clark, the challenges that he had in terms of crafting in Arthur, a character that was consistent regardless of what the player decided to do with him, it's an amazing needle that I think my friend threaded. But it's a challenge that I did not have. And I will tell you, I felt very lucky that I didn't have that concern. And so I could focus directly on what Dutch was going through without any concern that the player might do something that would make some precious idea that I had about the guy change. So I feel very lucky that I did not have to rise to the challenge that Roger and others did, where their character could be changed by the player. And the fact that they were able to so seamlessly create a character that existed within multiple iterations, I marvel at. I mean, I just think they did an amazing job, and I'm really glad I did not have that challenge. I didn't even see this. Okay, so reading my mother's incredible essay on my role as Dutch, she called it a privilege to play Red Dead Redemption 2. What does it mean for you, for her to have experienced it? What is your own opinion on modern video games as art forms? Wow. I love this question. My mom sent out this text message. For those who don't know, she sent a text message to me saying she had come to Fan Expo Boston. She had seen the amazing fans of Red Dead there. She was so moved by how everybody responded to the work that we had all done. And she got it in her mind at 75 that she was going to play the video game. And she sent me a text saying that she was going to do it and that she had a plan, which I thought was hysterical. I put it on Instagram, and I thought that was going to be the end of it. Everybody on Instagram lost their minds about it. And I didn't know if she was going to follow through with it or if she wasn't. She did. She followed through with it. And once I knew she was going to finish the game, I knew there was going to be an essay. Because it's just, my mother's an arts educator. She has been for most of her life, all of my life. And she's always taken quite seriously forms that young people are motivated by and drawn to. And when I was a teenager, she was curious about my comics and my comic book collection, and she did studies on that. And so it just seemed rather natural, although now I'm, 40-something and she's 75. But it did seem sort of a normal instinct of my mom's to want to see the work that I was a part of. So she did. She learned how to play the game. She played the game. She wrote this remarkable essay. I sort of tracked her progress on Instagram, and then the folks at the Red Dead Redemption Reddit server, along with some wonderful folks at Rockstar Games, they all read it. They all agreed that she'd written this extraordinary essay, and we got it up. And I think it's going to end up actually getting published in a literary journal not too long from now, and I'll announce that on Instagram too. So what does it mean for her to have experienced it? It means the world to me. I can't even tell you. It is, Dutch is as great a role as I've ever hoped to have, and to get to play him twice and to get to play him so thoroughly, that in and of itself is just a joy. But then to be able to share that with my mom, who you can't really understand how these stories have an impact on you unless you're playing the game. You have to play the game. So the fact that she did means the world to me, and the fact that so many people responded to her story, and the fact that so many people in their 70s are intersecting with this form of narrative, and hopefully maybe new ones are inspired by what my mother took the time to do. All of that's tremendously exciting. So it means the world to me that she experienced it. And my opinion on modern video games is art forms. Line them up. Yeah, it's art. It is art. There's no other way to describe it, and it's high art. I mean, if you think about the work from the level of, you could list off any number of games. I mean, what jumps to my mind is, outside of the Rockstar realm, is the extraordinary stuff Naughty Dog has done with the Uncharted series. But Last of Us, I don't know if I'm allowed to talk this way, but when Red Dead came out 10 years ago, I was like, this is the greatest video game ever made. There's no question it's the greatest video game ever made. There's nothing that's close to it. I was biased, of course. And then I played Last of Us, and I got to tell you, Last of Us is just, it's a remarkable story. It's remarkably acted. It's remarkably structured. You remember things from that experience as though you lived them. And I think that that's something that the Red Dead series does as well. But then God of War is also just such an amazingly well told narrative, and the direction, the scope, the scale, the imagination, the production design, the titles that are being produced are just extraordinary. And beyond that, when you think about What Remains of Edith Finch is a game that if you haven't played, I'd recommend playing. I just finished an amazing game called Rime. Now, those aren't games that have performances in them, and they're games that are made for less money, but they're no less impressive. This interactive entertainment and video games are, without any question, an art form. And that I get to be a part of it is remarkable to me. But that people are starting to understand that this is a legitimate form of storytelling, and there are stories that can be told in this space that cannot be told in any other space. It's one of the things that when I hear, people want to do like the stunt casting of the Red Dead Redemption movie and who would play who and this and that and the other. Why would there be a Red Dead Redemption movie? We have Red Dead Redemption, and we have Unforgiven. Unforgiven wouldn't be a video game, it's a movie. It is what it is, and I feel the same way about Red Dead. And although, as I say that, I understand Last of Us is going to be going to series on HBO, and I will be very eager to see that. So, but in my opinion, modern video games, there's no question that they're art. There's no question that they're art. I think you could make the argument that Donkey Kong is art, but that's another conversation. Would you ever want to see a third or fourth technical installment, and what would you hope that it focused on? Yes, I would like to see a fourth one. What do I hope it focused on? Dutch, all the time. I would like the work. I would be so delighted to be back in business with all those madmen and women at Rockstar Games. But here's the thing I know. There won't be another one unless there's a story to tell. And if there's a story to tell, I hope I get to be at least a part of it, even if I'm playing an 11-year-old version of Dutch Vanderland. I am so pleased. This is such an odd time with this pandemic going on to have an opportunity to connect with fans, thanks to MCM Comic Con, in this odd time, really means the world to me. It is such an honor to be a part of a game that has such a community of fans like Red Dead Redemption does. The fans that I have met and intersected with all over the world have been so kind to one another, so loving of the characters that we all got to portray, and so invested in the story that we spent so much of our lives trying to tell. It is nothing short of overwhelming, and every time I think about it, I just think, I am the luckiest guy. I'm just lucky. I feel very grateful, very fortunate, and I'm really sorry not to be able to be with everybody in person at this moment in time, but to be able to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Red Dead Redemption alongside some of my colleagues and with all of you, even though we're all sort of sheltering in our homes. I just want to thank MCM Comic Con very much for this opportunity, and it's really wonderful to be able to take part in this, even though we all are at the moment apart. Outlaws for life, guys. Thank you for having me. Stay safe, wash your hands, Look after your gang. We are in this together. All my very best.